Today I want to talk about a new deck that I recently purchased. This is the Mio Im's Tarot. It was released by Von Soos. You can get it on their website. I'll put a link below. Mio Im is a illustrator and tattoo artist that's located in Seoul, South Korea. Her artwork is, as you'll see throughout the deck, it's very very clean, very just has almost a graphic novel type feel to it. Leans towards the dark. It's definitely got some spooky vibes going, which is always nice. I've really enjoyed working with the deck, the little bit that I have so far, and I really, really enjoy the artwork. In fact, I'm probably going to end up purchasing a few prints of hers, in the next couple months, because I'm really, really enjoying it. I'm not going to do a full walkthrough. There's a video that was released by Madam that is a full walkthrough of the deck. It's only a couple months old. I definitely recommend checking that out. I'll put a link in the description for that video as well. He does a good job of walking through the deck and showing all the cards. I really wanted to kind of just talk about it, real briefly. There's a few things that I really, really, really like about the deck. It's super high quality. The cardstock is really nice. The printing is really nice. But I do have a few small negatives here and there about it. It's ironic that I used the word small negative there, because one of the negatives I'll show right off the bat, and it's not necessarily negative, but for use it is. This is the size of the deck. This is a standard Rider-Waite card. This is the Centennial edition, standard size, not the pocket, not the tin size. As you can see, the card is definitely wider and taller. It's I would say it's very similar, maybe not as tall as the Serpent Icons deck, if you're familiar with that at all, but it's close. I definitely have issues shuffling this. My hands just do not hold. I cannot do this deck sideways like a normal shuffling. So what I end up actually having to do is I could shuffle it, like that, which is not ideal, but it does work. Or obviously I just do it overhand. But it's one of the issues I definitely found with the deck. The size alone also just limits the amount of spreads that I'm going to do with this. I'm going to stick primarily to 3-5 card spreads, which is generally what I do anyway, just fine. But like anything, I'm not going to probably do any Celtic crosses or anything with this, because it's just the amount of table space you would need to do that would be insane. But that being said, I really love being able to see the artwork so nicely. Like I said, it's printed really well. I really love some of the imagery. When I first came across this deck, and I'll just start showing some of the cards. My wife had actually found it. It was mentioned in like a planner video that she was watching, and just let me know about it, and immediately I was interested, and then saw some certain cards that I just was like, oh, okay, they just hit me so hard that I'm like, okay, I need to get this deck. Which actually kind of raises one of the other negatives about this deck is it is expensive. This is probably the most expensive individual deck that I have purchased. I think it's going for about $120 on the website right now. That is definitely what I can remember. This is the most expensive individual deck that I have purchased. I mean, I've bought other decks that were more expensive, but they usually came with, it's either part of a set or, something like Serpent Icons might have been around that same price, but that also came with like a really nice hardcover book. But again, the quality is amazing on this. I really like it. I still recommend it 100% at that price, but it definitely limits the audience. But as you can see, like, the imagery is really, really nice. The miners can get a little pippish at times, more than at times, but for the most part, I'm okay with that. There are some that really do have a more illustrative feel to the, tell a story more. And I'll showcase some of those. My plan for this is I wanted to, just walk through some of these cards, and then show some specific cards that I either really resonated with, or I think there's a couple instances that I pulled out that of cards that I was kind of a little questioning, because while this is not supposed to be aligned 100% with RWS, it does mostly. I think on the Van Zos website, Mio Im had said in the description that, it shouldn't necessarily be read as traditional tarot. It's supposed to be read kind of as a storybook and take your own interpretation, which is great. I'm all for that. I like having the challenge of, something different. But I will say on some of the cards, especially when you start getting into the pip type cards, it would be nice if there was a little bit more to read off of on the imagery. And like and you'll see this is fairly common throughout the deck, that where there's, this is the Fool card, and there's some similarities with RWS, but there's definitely a difference. There's definitely number one, there's definitely a mood with this deck, but there's also a difference in, some way it's comprised of all the elements at times. This is missing a number of elements from RWS, but, you got the stick, obviously there's a journey that's about to happen, the sun's in front of them, they're heading in that direction. The journey's about to begin. There is a change happening. Definitely leans dark. Here, perfect example here too. There's all the elements of the strength card. You got the jaw, you got the hand, you got the infinity symbol. There's all these elements here of the strength card, but they're separated, they're disassembled. It has a different feel. I mean, you definitely interpret this a little bit different in a reading than you would with the traditional RWS or TDM or anything. So, it's it has some interesting cards. The palette is muted, but nice. It's very, I really like the, it tends to stick to either grays, blacks, or whites, and then, but there's like these pops of red that come through every now and then, like, perfect. The red gloves here, it really, some cards have like a red background. They really help when you're doing a reading, kind of pop that card out a little bit more for you. It's such a thing. But here's like a perfect example of it, very pippish. card. You know, this is the Ten of Cups. Cups are all the cups are signified with skulls in this deck. Wands are antlers, swords are swords, and then what would traditionally be pentacles is shown as hearts in this deck. And they flip-flop between being very realistic-looking hearts or cutesy hearts that would be drawn. You know, like this is an interesting card too. Like this one I actually almost pulled out to showcase separately, but the Three of Cups. I mean, there's still this idea of friendship and there's celebration, but it definitely has a darker, you know, just with the skull hand joining in, there's definitely gives a different connotation than a traditional Three of Cups card. Two of Swords, same thing. Another one that's comprised of elements. You know, there's still this idea of decision, and you know, particularly a tough decision that has to be made. But this one kind of telling you that both outcomes are not necessarily, you know, there's no ambiguity here. I mean, whatever choice you make is not necessarily going to be a good one. You know, with the swords or knives right in the eye. But you have the blindfold, you have the two swords, you have the person. So, yeah, I really, really recommend this deck. I really love a lot of the imagery. It reads really interesting. I don't tend to read a lot for other people. I tend to read for myself. I think I've mentioned this a number of times in videos. I'm going to try to be a little bit better with that. And try to read for more people. But this is going to be, I think, an interesting deck to read for other people because it's definitely a very, I don't want to say it's a negative deck, but it's definitely leaning more dark, clearly, with this imagery. But, you know, like this is a perfect card. Look at how beautiful this card is. The red pops so nicely. It's still a muted color, but it's just so nice. The one thing I did want to talk about is the deck doesn't really come with a guidebook. It has a pamphlet that comes in the tuck box, but if this zooms in correctly, you'll see that the keywords that are listed are in Korean. So, not necessarily the easiest to figure out. I did use, you know, like the Google Translate app on my phone, and it was able to, in the right lighting, because contrast is pretty low, so it's a little bit difficult to pick up some of the characters. But in the right lighting, it will give you translation. And from what I was seeing, for the most part, they align pretty closely with RWS thinking. Again, you know, I think when you're using the deck, you'll get your own interpretation for certain cards. I'll just run through a couple more of these. I love this Ten of Swords. The swords suit, especially, I feel, with most decks, but with this deck especially, it really resonates for me. You know, it's a fairly traditional idea of the Three of Swords here. I love this Page of Cups as well. Again, definitely leans darker than you would normally think with the Page of Cups, but it still kind of works for me. So let's get into some of the specific cards that I had pulled out. I think it'll be interesting to go through. So one of the first cards that I saw that made me instantly want this deck was the Hermit card. To me, and I'm going to show these along with the RWS counterpart just to give a frame of reference. I think that'll be helpful for people. But to me, this Hermit card really resonated with me. It's always about introspection, study, going away to get the knowledge, but then, coming out illuminated, illuminated with that knowledge and having the ability to see the path in front of you. To me, as somebody who's a big fan of having a library and takes pride in their books, this kind of says it all to me. I mean, you're standing upon the books the assumption is that you've read these books. You have these markings on the legs that, they look like, scars or anything, but they also look like the slashes of counting down the days. So you can think about being in like a self-imposed exile, of study, of gaining the knowledge that you want, and by that knowledge allows you to lift you up, to give you some clarity, some height in the situation, to see over whatever walls are blocking you. That's how I look at this card, and to me it just resonated really strongly that you're using this knowledge that you're gaining through study. So to me, I really liked the way that read. One of the other cards that really resonated for me was the Six of Swords. It has a different feel, and actually where I would say that this card, there's always been with the RWS version, I feel like there's a melancholy to this card. You're moving on, there's movement, you're moving forward, but you're letting go of things as well, and there's a sadness here, and I feel like in here there's this exaltation of you're leaving the baggage behind, but you're using it to get you from point A to point B. You're elevated, you're heightened, there's a weight lifted off of you, allowing you to move forward. So it's interesting. This is one of the few cards I feel in the deck that has a more positive take to it than maybe a traditional RWS does. Another card I really liked was the Temperance card. Visually, it's a very different looking card from each other from the RWS, but to me, this kind of resonated to me because it's kind of a symbolic of the balance of being in two different places, of being two different people to some extent. Maybe being a more your everyday, and then more embracing the more occult side of life. But it does kind of, there's much like Temperance, there's 1 foot on the earth and 1 foot on the spiritual, in the water. And it's a very similar idea here. And basically it's trying to tell you need that balance between the two. You don't want to be too much in one or too much in other and miss out on the other side. this card really just kind of resonated for me. I really did like it, and yeah, it's an interesting card to read with, I felt. This is a card that, while it's very simplistic, and in some ways I feel is a little limiting in its ability to read, I do feel like it definitely resonated with me, for a variety of reasons. So this is the Tower card. Obviously, the way that somebody would read the Tower card, or let me say, the way that I generally read the Tower card is not necessarily in a negative way. Obviously, there's an abrupt change happening, but I do look at it as a way that you're getting rid of systems that that no longer support you, or things that no longer support you. And you need to flee those. Whether by choice or not. Now, with this Tower card, obviously, it's a spinal column. This is the structure. This is the thing that holds your body upright. As somebody who has back problems and who has had back surgery, specifically in the L4, L5 area, which just seems to be kind of didn't hear this kind of just hit me in a way. What's interesting about this card is that it has this separation in the spine. Whereas in a card like the Tower, this could be anything that you're using as a support, or just anything in your life that is an abrupt change. The connotations here, though, is that this is part of you. This is something you can't really do without. So it's interesting. I actually have not had this card actually come up in a reading yet, for me. So it'd be very interesting to see, based on its positioning and everything, how I would interpret it. And based on what the reading is for, and the current and the question. But it's to me, it was a card that hit home, that I wanted to point out. But to that end, the next card in the sequence of the major arcana is the Star card. And what I liked about this is that it kind of keeps the narrative going, which kind of goes along with what I had said earlier. That Mio Im said it's like a storybook. You still have the line here talking about basically highlighting the spine, and then you're getting the star. To me, what's interesting here is that this is hitting like the base of the spine, or the base of the neck and skull area. I mean, you can interpret this in a number of different ways. If you want to look at it as, this could be pointing to the throat chakra. Talking about changing the base, changing your support, finding a new path, and then it could be opening up the Vishuddha chakra. So, if memory serves, and I may be wrong, obviously, comment below. But if memory serves, that's about, to some extent, awakening. Clear, keeping that clear and open gives you more of a spiritual awakening, if I am remembering chakras correctly. There's a lot of different ways that you can look at this, but to me, I thought the sequence of these cards was interesting. just because I don't think we really saw most of the cards that have the red background. I want to talk about the Nine of Swords. I think this is a very traditional idea. It gives that anxiousness. It gives that idea of dread that the traditional Nine of Swords gives. That there's this anguish and anticipation of what can be happening. And I think this card speaks to that perfectly. So it's a really nice card. I think graphically it's just beautiful. The line work is great. Just the color palette I think is just wonderful in this deck. And this is a card that I actually have quite a negative about. I think I feel like maybe I just haven't spent enough time with it yet, but I feel like as the Magician card, this kind of drops the ball. Obviously I get it's going for, the typical magician, that rabbit in the hat, pulling a dove or bird out of somewhere. But what I feel is missing, I'd feel so much better about this if it had all the tools. If it had, I think it doesn't have the as above, so below symbolism here. It doesn't have so many. Yes, it's the tools of the trade of a magician, but there's just so much missing. I think there's so much that could have been done with this card. I feel like this is just a lost opportunity. Really, this could have been such a better card, and I feel like this is really the one. I mean, there's a couple cards, but this is, I think, the most egregious card. And this will be the last one I talk about. But this is the Five of Swords. This is a card. There's some similarity here, but I feel like there's a different interpretation. Obviously, it's a person with five swords still. You get in the idea that the battle is over. So there's still this idea of like winning. There's still this idea of defeating others. The battle is over, and you've come out the victor, but you need to move on and keep trudging forward. And I feel this probably conveys that more. I think it this has more of a perseverance and winning at all costs kind of feel to it than I think this portrays. But again, I think it's fine. I like seeing cards that will challenge my conceptions of the cards in traditional readings. And I know I get the irony of saying that after that Magician card, but I feel like that Magician card didn't give you enough to work with. Whereas something like this, I think it does. It gives you enough to work with. There's enough here that you can interpret, you can build the story around. Where I think with the Magician card, that was kind of lacking. So, but yeah, I mean that's basically the deck. I really do like it. It's quickly become a favorite of mine. It's got the few negatives that I talked about. One of the other negatives is they put a copyright on the back of every card, which for anybody that likes to read reversals, that's going to be a nuisance. But to me, at least it's not on the artwork, so I guess I'll take that. I'd prefer if it didn't have any copyrights on it, but I understand you know, with the amount of bootlegs and everything out there, it's kind of crazy. And for a deck this expensive, I'm assuming that there's probably some bootlegs out there. So, but yeah, no, I mean, I highly recommend this deck. I know the price point puts it out of the way for a number of people. You know, most of the time I wouldn't justify that price either. Very few decks I do. It really has to resonate with me in a certain way, and I do feel like this deck especially does. To me, this is more of an art piece. That's a functional art piece. You know, that's how I'm looking at this deck. You know, I would spend that for a print. I would spend that for, you know, a well done art book. So, you know, tarot deck is no different. And like I said, I mean, I get the price. It's really good quality. Cardstock is great. It's got a nice linen finish. It shuffles really well when you can shuffle it. I mean, my hands, I mean, I have short, stubby hands, so I'm probably not the best person, but anybody that has longer fingers and bigger hands can probably shuffle this easier. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy for anybody, but yeah, it's a nice deck. I really, really recommend it. I'm going to definitely be using it a lot. I'm hoping that I'm trying to get a little bit more comfortable. Hopefully I'll start popping up on people's lives, doing some readings or something. And this is definitely one of the decks that I think I'm going to pull out, just because I think it's a beautiful deck. I don't think enough people know about it. You know, the copyright is from 2021, but yet, like I said, I think the only other video I saw on YouTube about it really was Madam Adams' walkthrough, and that was fairly recent. So I'm not actually sure when this deck came out, but definitely recommend it. So, yeah, thank you. Hopefully this is helpful for people, and yeah, let me know what you think of the deck, and you know, let me know if it's a deck that you plan to purchase yourself. I really would like to hear more from people who this deck resonates with. So please leave a comment. You know, do all the YouTube stuff, like and subscribe, yada yada. All right, I'll talk to you soon.